let us go ahead and get started. So welcome to a live Q&A lunch with me, Kelli from Chicago Movie Tours. So I thought that today we would respond to either 10, I think I have 10 or 11 questions that people have asked, people on Instagram, people on TikTok, people just through my website form itself. So we'll hit up 10 or 11 questions today, and then if you have questions along the way, you can certainly put those in the chat and I'll try to get to those as best as I can. Some questions, of course, require a bit of research. That's why I asked for questions a little bit beforehand so that I could have some research and some solid answers for you prepared for today. So if you're new here, I'm Kelli. I run Chicago Movie Tours. My goal, pretty simple, which most of you know by now, is to discover Chicago through film. So with the questions that many of you have come up with over the past week or so, we will definitely have that in our mind as we are discovering Chicago through film through your questions. So if you are interested in film and Chicago related events that are not necessarily live Q&As, do check out chicagomovietours.com after our virtual program or follow along on social media at Chi Movie Tours. Okay, so with the questions that have been asked of me over the last week or so, I've broken them into 3 categories because they seemed as though that each of these questions fell into one of these 3 categories. So that's kind of how we'll roll today on our live Q&A. So we'll start with questions that people have asked specifically about Chicago's film industry, whether that be past or present or future with regard to the industry itself. And secondly, we will ask or answer some questions that you have asked about Chicago Movie Tours specifically. And then 3, some of the more personal questions that some of you have asked about favorite movies or just why I use certain technology that I do with regard to running these virtual programs. So those sorts of things will hit at the very end. All right, so let's start then with Chicago's film industry. And I think I have 3 good questions that several of you have asked me over the last week with regard to that question. Starting with, hey Jane, starting with this question. What's happening with the new studios opening in the old Marshall Fields building? So this comes to us from Jennifer. So if you're not familiar with what she's asking here, let me give you a little bit of background on this question about the new studios. So the film studios is what she's talking about here, that are supposed to be opening at an old Marshall Fields building. So she's referencing this article, or at least an article similar to this one. This one is specifically from Business Wire, and I posted it to Chicago Movie Tour social platforms, Facebook and Twitter and whatnot, in May of this year. So it's a relatively new article and a new subject under discussion here in Chicago. But let's look at the headline together. So it reads, Chicago's entertainment industry gets a major boost with construction of the first and only purpose-built film studios in Illinois, the Fields Studios. And you can see a little bit further down in the description in the smaller text that these studios are created for producers by producers. So this is supposed to be located on the city's northwest side off Diversey Avenue. So here's another article, also May 2003, that's covering the Fields Studios. This one comes to us from Variety. And it's called the Fields Studios because the location of these presumed studios are supposed to be in a former warehouse and distribution center for the massive department store Marshall Fields, which was based here for so long. The property currently as it stands also is a mix of retail space, office space, and I believe there are either apartments or condominiums that you can rent within this space as well. So it's a huge, huge property. But what these articles tell us in sum is that the Fields Studios is supposed to feature 9 sound stages, as well as at least 1 stage for commercial shoots or advertising shoots, as well as music videos and other really small productions like that. So this is supposed to be the largest combination of sound stages in Chicago. So I have one more article here. This one gives us a little bit more with regard to pictures. So this is from the Chicago Tribune, and it's showing us there on the far left of your screen some of the construction, and then if I blow up those bottom 2 images for you, you can see here some of the interior shots of, or at least the top right would be an interior shot of the Marshall Fields warehouse that will ultimately be converted into office space for these studios. And then you can see on the bottom right, a new building is under construction for the North Campus of the studios. So it's very obscure with regard to newspaper articles as to when this was supposed to be completed. Now, if you go to Field Studios' website, which is thefieldstudios.com, whoops, I'm hidden behind there, but nonetheless, you can see the website better anyway. So this is the homepage of thefieldstudios.com, and it basically advertises itself as being open, right? If you look on the bottom right-hand corner, it reads, "The Field Studios is the first purpose-built studio campus in Chicago, meticulously designed for producers by producers." So if you go see that on that's the very first thing you see on the website. Underneath there, you also see on the website, you see mock-ups like the ones that you're seeing on your screen now, which show you what the Field Studios will look like when complete. Massive sound stages. You had 6, 7, and 8 in that previous shot. This is the gate for the Field Studios. There's stage 3, 4, 2, as well as all sorts of trailers there, obviously, too. So it seems as though this is open, right? But that is not the case, at least according to their Facebook page, because just this month you have this article or the posting from Facebook, which tells us the Field Studios construction is underway. The campus will be complete with 350,000 total square feet of sound stages. And then there is a video following this that you can watch and kind of see the production or the process of the sound stages as they are being built, like you see right there. So the answer then to Jennifer's question, what's happening with the new studios that are supposed to be opening at the old Marshall Fields building? I would answer that as it seems it's still a work in progress. But you can definitely follow along on their Facebook page because they do seem to be giving relatively recent updates as to what they're doing with that space. All right, so there's our first question. Here's a second one with regard to Chicago's film industry. So our second question, Matt asks, what is the highest grossing movie filmed in Chicago? And I'll give you a few seconds here if you want to guess what that might be. What is the highest grossing movie filmed in Chicago? Because some of you might already know this. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, I'll give you some hints. It's not Spider-Man 2, which does have a lot of money attached to it and was filmed partially in Chicago. It's not a Transformers movie. It's not a John Hughes movie that has been fixed for inflation purposes. So what do you think the highest grossing movie is that was filmed here in Chicago? Any guesses before we move on? Hi, Amy. Amy has a guess of The Dark Knight. Anybody else want to guess? And I am going to say that, yes, Amy is right. Let's look down here at the top lifetime grosses of films. And we are going to look at the domestic grosses here. So we'll start, you can see obviously Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens is the top grossing film ever. But let us move down in the list, and we're going to head close to number 20, I believe. Yes, number 17. So The Dark Knight domestically made $535 roughly million. And it ranks as number 52 worldwide with $1 billion. Avatar has that top spot with $3 billion. But the first movie that's on this list that domestically speaking that is filmed entirely or even partly in Chicago is The Dark Knight. So The Dark Knight, that's the second installment in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, if you're familiar with this. This is a trilogy that he did from 2005 to 2012, starting with Batman Begins over there on the left-hand side of your screen from 2005, The Dark Knight in 2007, and The Dark Knight Rises in 2012. And collectively, these movies grossed over $2.4 billion at the box office worldwide. So the first two, yes, were filmed here in Chicago, also on sets in England as well as on location in Hong Kong, but a lot of them obviously in Chicago. And if you've been keeping up with the latest with The Dark Knight in the news, you might also have seen that this is quite exciting. that Barbie surpasses The Dark Knight at Warner Brothers as Warner Brothers' highest grossing domestic release in history. So Barbie has made over 537.5 million, topping The Dark Knight with that. So that's kind of cool. Here's another article that tells you a little bit more about Chicago's industry and when The Dark Knight was filming here in 2006. So The Dark Knight, as our article tells us with the headline, generated nearly $40 million in revenue for the Illinois economy while it was filming here, making it the largest movie filmed in Illinois on record. And I think it still holds that title as well. And if you look further down in the article, you might see, I think it's in the first paragraph, there 4,500 job hires were created here when this movie was in production. That includes, of course, people who are help designing sets, people who are in electrical work, doing makeup, doing costuming, hairstyling, driving trucks, actors, all sorts of cast and crew that came here from Chicago to help participate in the creation of The Dark Knight. And if you go further down into this article, you also learn that this year, 2007, marked the single best year in the state's history where film is concerned, or film production is concerned. And you also learn a little bit more from the governor at the time that success was in part because of the Illinois film tax credit. We'll get to that in another Q&A because I could talk at length about the tax credits here in Chicago and why having that has brought so many people into the city for production purposes. So the question then, what is the highest grossing movie filmed in Chicago so far? The Dark Knight is our answer for that. Okay, number 3. Jane asked, who I think is in the comments here, Jane asked, or who is watching today, how is Chicago's movie industry doing? So, relatively general question. That's excellent. And I am going to pull in some really cool promotional material that has recently come out. I believe it's the spring of this year from the Illinois Film Office. So this is the cover of a big spread that was in Variety magazine. And you can see here, Chicago, big shoulders, big scenes, big stories. And that big shoulders, perhaps you might know, comes from Carl Sandburg's poem called Chicago, and it's the first couple of lines of this poem. Hog butcher for the world, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads and the nation's freight handler, stormy, husky, brawling, city of the big shoulders. And then he continues with his description of how he sees Chicago. So we have Chicago, big shoulders, big scenes, big stories there. So let me give you some numbers from this spread and the promotional material from the Illinois Film Office to answer Jane's question. So $700 million in production revenue has been created as of the last, I'm not sure how many years actually. I guess it was this 2021 probably is when this was being discussed. So that's 110 million more than it was in 2019. In 2021, the production spent in television here in Chicago was 86%. So the majority of things that are filming here in Chicago are related to TV, not necessarily film. You also see 13% there for commercials and advertisements, a lot of those filming here in the city. CineSpace Chicago is the film studio that most people come here and film at. In fact, the Bear TV series that we'll talk about in just a second, that filmed, I think, a good chunk of its second season at CineSpace, since the Field Studios, as we know, are not quite open yet. But CineSpace, this article tells us from Variety, is the second largest soundstage in the country, so not just in Illinois. And the success of Chicago's film industry and how it's doing, as Jane asked, has to do with that expanded film production tax, which I was mentioning in the question before. It's about 30% for those who come here, as well as diversity credits, encouraging people of different races and ethnicities and genders to come here and work, and you get a tax break if you are falling into one of those categories. Of course, you have iconic Chicago locations that are really hard to duplicate on screen, so that's one reason that people come here to film, and then surrounding Illinois locales as well. So, just moving right outside the city to shoot some of these films. So lots of reasons for the success of Chicago's film industry. So how Chicago's film industry is doing, I would say not too shabby. Not too shabby. All right, Patricia asked, are there any movies filmed in or near Starved Rock, Deer Park, or Buffalo Rock State Park? All right, now, if you're not from the Chicago area, you might not know of Starved Rock. So I'll give a little map here. You can see Chicago there on the top right-hand side of your screen, and we are going to head about 80 miles from Chicago to Oglesby, Illinois. And Starved Rock was originally the home to several Native American tribes. Joliet and Marquette, if you've been around Chicago long enough, you know those names, but those are the first Europeans, explorers that were recorded as exploring the region now known as Starved Rock. And Starved Rock State Park is called that because, and I'll say legend has it, that in the late 18th century there were 3 tribes of Native Americans. 2 tribes of Native Americans, the Ottawa and the Potawatomi, starved out another tribe, that 3rd tribe there. And so that area became known as Starved Rock, where they literally starved them to death. So I went to Starved Rock for the first time earlier this summer, and here is some of my footage for that. So here we are about to head over to the area where you can see the Illinois River, as well as a dam in the background, the Starved Rock Dam. So lovely, lovely location. In the late 19th century, this did become a vacation resort, and it's still very much used as that today. There are places for you to camp. There are all sorts of walking trails, hiking trails, and all sorts of things to do if you were interested in hanging out in the outdoors in the summertime. So again, here's our question. Are there any movies filmed in or near Starved Rock, etc.? So there are a couple of documentaries that are filmed in Starved Rock that are on the Starved Rock murders. So that's another reason that Starved Rock is relatively well known, perhaps outside of Illinois. In the 1960s, or 1960, I believe, there were 3 women who were from Riverside, Illinois, a suburb in the western area of Chicago, that were killed in one of the canyons, or murdered in one of the canyons here in Starved Rock. They were some wives of prominent Chicago businessmen, and they took an afternoon hike through the St. Louis Canyon, of which I also have footage for a future virtual tour. But these women never returned, and there are all sorts of questions that still haunt this case. So there's a 2001 TV miniseries, The Murders at Starved Rock, that has connections here, but there's also a narrative film, a 1989 fantasy drama called Prancer that was filmed, just a little bit of it, inside Starved Rock. This movie stars Sam Elliott, if you know who that is. As far as I can tell, this is the only major motion picture that's been filmed inside the park itself. So let's go back though. I mean, that's fine and dandy, but I have found in my research other movies that people may not know about that have also filmed much more extensively in Starved Rock than Prancer, for example. So here we have a shot from 1912. This is American Film Company, and there are a whole lot of people there. Hopefully you can see between those trees that are camped out at Starved Rock. So they are filming a 1912 film about the adventures of Marquette and Joliet, who I mentioned just a moment ago, the explorers that came here in the 1600s. So there were about 90 people in this film crew, several of whom you can see in that shot. But apparently this was not a great experience for many folks in the crew itself, because I have also found this quote in a different magazine, which reads, "The 60 members, some say 90, some say 60, of the American company encamped at Starved Rock, Illinois, have been quarreling about their rations, their food. Finally, the director sent to Chicago for a dining car chef, and now all is well. They should now change the name Starved Rock." So fortunately, these people are no longer starving, as they were suffering to make this movie in 1912. And here's another one from 1916. This is a movie called Power. And you can see at the top there, 3 summer camps are furnishing the settings for S&A Films. S&A, if you've been with me on these virtual tours before, you know is a film studio that was very popular here in the silent era. So we have a 1916 movie called Power, which is a political story that was filmed at Starved Rock, where that first paragraph under the arrow tells a little bit more about what they were doing here. And there's also a travel log, which would be just shots of trees, shots of the rocks, shots of the river, all sorts of things like that, just to show people what Starved Rock would have looked like in 1913. So several older movies actually came out to Starved Rock and filmed. So yes, the answer to this question is definitely so. A few of them. I'm unsure about the other two locations that Patricia mentions, Deer Park or Buffalo Rock. I just kind of focused on Starved Rock for that one. Okay, so we've talked about Chicago's film industry. Let's talk a little bit about the questions that you had for Chicago Movie Tours content specifically. Starting with TV Doc. This is one of my former colleagues from when I taught film as a professor. This is Taylor, and he is TV Doc on TikTok, I believe. So TV Doc's question is, what is your process for researching locations for new films and shows? And honestly, I don't highlight new films or TV shows all that much, do I? And those of you who've been around for a while probably can attest to that. And that's because usually I am more interested in discovering Chicago through nuggets about film and television that few people know. It's very easy to get online and look up information about The Dark Knight or Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There's plenty of information out there about those kinds of movies, for example. So I'm interested in finding like strange sort of off-center information about films and TV shows, which is why I create virtual tours on women who run silent movie theaters like the Morse or the Main Stage in the bottom right-hand corner. I'm more interested in how an actor from Boys in the Hood can link that very South Central LA movie to Chicago. And I'm really interested in why in the world there's a Dolly Parton mural prominently displayed in Chicago's Edgewater neighborhood. So those are sort of the things that I'm interested in, which is why I kind of steer clear of really new popular TV shows and films. That said, I am about 80% finished with a walking tour on The Bear, which is a very popular, at least in the Illinois area, television show that premiered in the summer of 2022. So that's a very recent show. It wrapped its second season, just finished its second season this summer, so hopefully you've seen that. And it was renewed almost automatically for a third season and was nominated for about 13 Emmys. So this show is doing very well critically. So I can take you through the process perhaps for researching a location or researching locations for this pretty new show that I don't deal with or dabble with very much. So there's a picture of me in front of Mr. Beef. This is where the show The Bear is filmed, especially for season 1. And it's also the restaurant on which the narrative and the characters are based for The Bear. So with that in mind, I knew that this would be a must-stop location on a walking tour. I mean, if people are going to come to Chicago and take a walking tour on The Bear, that is what they're going to want to see. So that definitely has to be in there. So that's going to automatically narrow down which area of Chicago I can easily move through and explore within, let's say, 90 minutes or so for a walking tour. So after I figure that out, this is kind of how it works in my mind as to how I figure walking tours and virtual tours for that matter. So first off, I try to find a hook, and I try to find a hook that is unique to the TV show or the film itself. So for example, with regard to The Bear, yes, I can show you this place that they film or this place that they film. But also I want to know about how Chicago looks in The Bear, why this particular part of Chicago is in The Bear. So I have to start thinking in those sorts of terms, and also keeping in mind the mission, which is to discover Chicago through film and television. So making sure Chicago is always at the forefront of whatever I'm discussing on The Bear. So secondly, after I find that relatively unique hook that nobody else is doing, hopefully, I'm going to explore locations that are seen on the show itself. So like Mr. Beef, the Chicago River is shown quite a bit. Marina Towers are shown all the time in that show, as is the L. So things like that, locations that you definitely see on the show that you can take people to and talk to them a little bit more about that. Also, I want to explore locations that are not necessarily on the show, but would be on our route that you can relate to the show. So for example, if you start at the Clark Street Bridge, which is a big part of the show itself, you're going to be very close to the House of Blues. House of Blues is not featured in The Bear at all, but there is a lot of music that is featured in The Bear that has connections to the House of Blues. People who have played in there, people who have plaques inside the House of Blues, or monuments or things of that nature. So think about locations that you can relate to the show, that you can still be talking about the show and show Chicago in its glorious light as well. Number 4, research the hell out of your choices and make notes. So research, research, research. I do that pretty much, maybe more so than perhaps I should, but that allows me to learn every single thing I can that has come out about these shows or films. And it also helps me to do number 5, which is anticipate any random questions that people might have as they are taking a tour with me. And then after you do all of that, you've got it all in your mind, you're going to walk the route. Walk the route, re-walk the route. And then finally, you will have to promote these tours, whether they be virtual or in person, and hope people will be interested in them. So what is your process for researching locations for new films and TV series? That's pretty much my process for creating walking tours, and I would say virtual tours as well. And the next question, which comes to us, I think from Todd, who is likely here watching right now, that may not be in the chat. But the next question that he has for us is similar, but it's really more about virtual tours. And it's kind of a 2-part question. So the first part is, how do you manage to present such a seamless live virtual tour? And secondly, how many screens are you looking at while you are showing pre-recorded walking videos, monitoring and responding to comments, and presenting all of that information? So first off, we'll start with question number 1, which is, how do you manage to present seamless virtual tours? First, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. And one word I can answer this question in is planning. Lots and lots of planning. So as you learned with the previous question that comes to us from TV Doc about the process of working new tours into the mix, lots of planning occurs. And I have that in conjunction with a program called Keynote, which is like PowerPoint, but it's for Mac users. And Keynote has been a game changer in the last probably several months, I would say 7 or 8 months, because I have learned that you can insert live video, which is what I'm doing now, right next to these slides themselves. So I can have all sorts of animation happening while you can still see and hear me speak. So a lot of planning, a lot of research in conjunction with Keynote, and in conjunction with the platform that I'm currently streaming to, obviously. So YouTube and Facebook seem to have the best streaming output, so I like to use those. I do not like Zoom. I do like Zoom for its privacy, but it does not do well as far as high quality definition. And I'm very interested in making sure that people who are seeing these things get it in as the best quality as possible. So that leads to Todd's second question, which is this one: how many screens are you looking at while you're doing all of this stuff? So these are technical questions, I know, but here's one view of what I'm looking at, sort of currently, as we are talking here. So you see that I have 4 screens. On the far right-hand side of the screen, there's my iPad, which I have here, and it's controlling volume, and it is controlling what I am able to input out to you through a program called OBS. I have another computer over there on the far left-hand side where I'm able to see the comments that you are writing, whether it be on YouTube or Facebook. And I can also see my face on YouTube as well to make sure that everything is up and running as it should be. The computer in the middle is the one that I run everything off of. So that's where the Keynote presentation is, as well as OBS, which is how I'm zooming everything out to you. And then the big monitor is just a reflection of that, basically. So that's how I'm doing it. Most recently, I have added this new little thing, which is called Stream Deck, which, if it were plugged in, would allow me to mute certain people. If it were on Zoom, for example, and you can just push a button and it will change a slide for you. It will allow you to screen share on Zoom, things like that. So that's a relatively new addition that is really handy for Zoom. So that is how I run things, presumably smoothly. Okay, so one more question here. Do you do any live streamed and or in-person tours of Chicago's North Shore? This comes from Yassine. So if you're not from Chicago, again, here's a map. You can see Chicago in the darker yellow, the North Shore in the red. So the North Shore, a bit north of Chicago, you're talking about villages, towns like Evanston, Glencoe, Highland Park, Lake Forest, Skokie, Wilmette, Winnetka, those sorts of towns. So that's what he's asking about. And yes, I do have virtual programs and in-person talks that center on the North Shore. So for example, the one at the very top is a program that I do often for libraries, for example. This is called Chicago Christmas Movies in Class, where I take you with my virtual camera up to Winnetka and Wilmette, and we talk about Home Alone, which was filmed there. In my virtual tour on Robin Williams in Chicago, we have a little tour up to Lake Forest, so that's North Shore. And then I have 2 virtual programs, I think, now on the Breakfast Club, and one of those, or not one of those, but both of those tours talk about John Hughes, who of course lived in the North Shore and centered several of his films around that area as well. So there are 3 of them that do get into that part of Chicago. And speaking of John Hughes and the Breakfast Club, let's head into our last round of questions, which are some of the more personal ones, and these will be relatively shorter answers for you. So Tommy, who is here today, has this question for me. Tommy asks, what is your favorite and least favorite John Hughes movie and why? This is a good one for you to answer too in the comments. So if you want to jump over there and do that, I'd love to know what your favorite and least favorite John Hughes films are. By the way, listen to Tommy's Chicago History podcast if you're not already. I know that you're here because you love Chicago and film. Tommy delves into Chicago and film on a relatively regular basis, as well as all sorts of other really cool historical facts about the city. So find Chicago History Podcast where you get your podcast. Okay, my question. What is your favorite John Hughes movie? Don't laugh, but it's this one. Or do laugh. It's a funny movie, right? My favorite John Hughes movie is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Even if it was not filmed here in Chicago, it only has some establishing shots in the city. And even if John Hughes did not direct it. So John Hughes did write this movie. I cannot remember the director at this particular moment, but I love this movie. I watch it every Christmas, more than once. I've really never liked traditional popular Christmas movies, or those that society deems popular, like A Christmas Story. Never really got into that one, or White Christmas, or Elf. Not that one either. The Grinch, I'm just not a big fan of that one. So this one, though, however, it mixes things that I really appreciate. Physical comedy, a lot of sight gags, and a lot of memorable lines. I mean, there are some of the lines from this movie that I will quote throughout the year, actually, such as, "Are you serious, Clark?" I will ask my husband that on occasion when he says something silly. So that's my favorite John Hughes film. Let me see what you wrote in the comments really quickly. We've got some Breakfast Club and Dutch. Oh goodness, I don't even know that I remember Dutch. Okay, so the other part of the question was, what's your least favorite John Hughes film? And that one is, I know some of you might be upset about this, but it's Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I find this movie very hard to watch. I've seen it more than once, but I don't really need to see it on a regular basis, even if it is one of those Thanksgiving movies that people suggest that you see. It's a very melancholy movie. It's there's an underlying sadness to this entire film. As I had mentioned to Tommy not terribly long ago, I think it was Tommy, I can only handle so much of John Candy. I love John Candy in little bit roles, but this is a lot of John Candy. So sorry to say, for some of you who love this film, this is my least favorite John Hughes movie. Okay, so Sarah asks another personal question of me. Have you ever met any famous people? So this is another good one for you to answer in the comments if you have access to that. Who have you met that's a celebrity or someone that is famous? I have a few up here. The first of which is both I have actual receipts. I have documentation. So on the top left, you have Giancarlo Esposito, or some say Esposito, who I met in Chicago, I believe, actually like a Comic Con event. And you also have, he was in Breaking Bad, of course, but I used to teach a movie called Do the Right Thing, which is a Spike Lee joint, and he has a very prominent role in that film. So I was going to see him to grab a picture for my students when I taught Do the Right Thing, to show them how cool I was. So there's me and Giancarlo, and then on the bottom right you have me and comedian Jim Gaffigan. My husband is on the other side of that picture, but I cut him out. So that was in Oklahoma in, goodness, 2007 or 2008. So all sorts of different hairstyles we got going on here. Let me see in the comments. 16 Candles. I'm looking to see what you all are saying about John Hughes films. 16 Candles style of humor is cringy. Yeah, the soundtracks are really good for John Hughes films for sure. Tommy is making fun of my bangs. Yes, rightly so. Don't get bangs. Okay, so there are two people that I have met who are famous. Now I have some, let's say, tangential, graces with fame with some of these people. I have not met them, but I have talked to on Twitter Spike Lee, Jane Fonda, and Mark Maron. I've talked to Mark Maron several times because there was at one point I was teaching a class that included an episode of a TV series that he wrote and partially directed. So I talked with him a few times about a specific episode. I also almost got hit in the face with a door from a pub by Ricky Gervais in London once. He ran right out the door and about hit me in the face. My husband and I saw Jeremy Piven at the top of an escalator in Las Vegas, and I shook hands with Katie Couric while standing outside the Today Show audience. Back when she did the Today Show. So there's some brushes with fame if I didn't necessarily meet them. I guess I did meet Katie Couric. Okay, so what movie can you watch over and over again? Another good one for you to answer in the comments as well. What movie can you watch over and over again? And I realize that this person has asked for one movie, but Amy, it says, has asked for one movie, but that's really difficult. So I'm going to give you 6 from wildly different genres, you might notice. So we have Singing in the Rain, we have Dirty Dancing, Shakespeare in Love, which I used to teach as a literature, actually. Something's Gotta Give with Jack Nicholson and Diane Keaton. I have seen that 65 times at least. Double Indemnity, which is an old film noir from 1944, and The Rock. It was really difficult for me to pick between The Rock and Con Air because I have watched those intensely many a time. I do enjoy a good action film. So I'm interested to know what you like that you could watch over and over again. And finally, what made you pick your major on movies? Why did you choose the city of Chicago, Gwen asks. All right, so what made you pick your major on movies? I have a short TikTok that I will let myself explain in that TikTok for you. And then we'll answer the last question, and then we will head out of here and let you finish your lunch. All right, so the first question, what made you pick your major on movies, has to do with this guy. This is William Shakespeare, so let my TikTok explain to you why he has forced me, or encouraged me, I should say, to pick my major on film. Let me share with you quickly a story about that guy and that guy. So I was a junior when I took my first Shakespeare class in college, and early in the term the professor had to leave town for a conference, so she left the class alone with this device. Now if you are of a certain age, you likely remember the cart. So the departmental assistant came in, put a Blockbuster VHS tape into the machine, and left. But then the screen was filled with the Tuscan countryside, this multiracial cast of characters wearing these breezy, cottony costumes, and the poetry of Shakespeare was on screen as well. The film was Kenneth Branagh's Much Ado About Nothing from 1993. The class only lasted an hour, so we did not have time to watch Much Ado About Nothing in its entirety, but I had seen enough to know that I wanted to see more, and I needed to figure out how to work films like this one into my profession. And I did that for more than a decade as a professor of film and literature, teaching students all about Shakespeare and his most well known and some more obscure plays. But now I am here with you tackling an equally fascinating subject in Chicago and film, just without the iambic pentameter. All right, I got jokes just without the iambic pentameter. So, Gwen, that's what made me pick my major on movies, was that I was taking a literature class, a Shakespeare literature class. It was on the comedies and histories, I believe. And when that film started playing, I realized, oh wow, I need to figure out a way to do this, to talk about these kinds of movies for the rest of my career. And so obviously I did that for a while. Okay, so the next question is, why did you choose the city of Chicago? Well, that has to do with academia. So with academia, you just go where the jobs go, where the jobs are. You don't really question it. Whenever there's a job available that is up your alley, you just kind of go. So for example, after I got my PhD, there was a job that was available to me in Toledo, Ohio. So my husband and I, he left his job in Dallas where I got my degree. We moved to Toledo, Ohio for the 3-year position that I had there. And we knew that after that position was over in 3 years, whoever got the job next or wherever there was a job opening next, we would go. So he's the one who actually got the job next in the Chicago area. And so I packed up from Toledo and we moved to the Chicago area. So that's why I chose the city of Chicago, because that's how academia rolls. All right, so hopefully that answers several of the questions that you asked of me. And if I did not get to answer any of the questions that you did ask, please do come back next month. So I'm going to try to do this again at the end of September. So I'll get your questions then, especially if you just submitted them today and I didn't have a chance to throw them into the mix. So thanks very much for joining me for this live Q&A lunch. I hope you learned something new about Chicago, its film industry, about Chicago movie tours, and maybe even about me, if that's what you were here for. So again, I do have another one coming up September the 26th. It'll be noon, so please do come back for that. We'll have all sorts of new questions, hopefully, that I can answer for you. Also, on Saturday of this weekend, Labor Day weekend, I have my second to last prison tour, Chicago and Movies in Prison, which is going to be out at Joliet from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then next week as well, we have Bob Newhart's Chicago coming to you at noon on Tuesday. And then later on in the month, we are going to talk about Chicago and the Wizard of Oz. That's through another venue, but it's free to the public. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up on their website, but you can do it through my website. Tuesday, September the 28th at 1 p.m. And I will be putting more material, more virtual tours. There are walking tours scattered throughout September as well that you can check out if you are interested in doing so. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your coming. I want to make sure that I didn't miss anybody's questions in the comment section over here. It looks as though that most of you are just commenting on some of the questions that I asked. People who can watch planes, trains, and automobiles over and over again. I understand. It's not a bad movie at all. It's just, there's too much feeling going on in that movie for me. Thank you, Amy, for showing up. Yes, the Bear Tour, hopefully coming to you in September, if not early October. All right. Yes, Gwen, definitely put your question in there. And I know, Peter, if you're still hanging around here, I know you asked a question relatively recently that I didn't get to put in, so I'll try to do that in our next live Q&A. So thanks very much for joining me. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon.